Why ancient humans were terrified of disease. You wake up feeling terrible. Fever, chills, your whole body aches, you can barely stand up. Today, you'd take some ibuprofen, maybe call your doctor, and be mostly fine within a week. For most of human history, that wasn't an option. For most of human history, getting sick was potentially a death sentence. Not always, not immediately, but it could be. And the truly terrifying part was that you had absolutely no idea why it was happening. No bacteria, no viruses, no concept of infection. Just yesterday you were fine, today you're dying, and nothing in your world explains why. Let's think about what disease looked like to someone with no medical knowledge. You watch a healthy person eat breakfast. They seem completely fine. 3 days later, they're burning with fever, covered in spots, shaking, and delirious. A week after that, they're dead. No wound, no animal attack, no visible cause. Something happened inside their body that you couldn't see, couldn't touch, and couldn't stop. And then, worst of all, other people started dying the same way, one after another, like something invisible was moving through the village. Whatever this was, it wasn't random. It was hunting them. Here's the thing about disease that ancient people couldn't possibly have known. It's caused by living organisms. Bacteria, viruses, parasites, fungi, microscopic life completely invisible to the naked eye that invades your body, multiplies inside it, and breaks things. The first person to see bacteria through a microscope was Antony van Leeuwenhoek in 1676. Germ theory, the actual scientific understanding that these organisms cause disease, wasn't established until the 1860s. For every human civilization that existed before 1860, disease was a complete mystery. The symptoms were visible, the cause was invisible, and invisible causes are always the scariest kind. Think about what that actually means practically. You can fight a lion, you can see a flood coming, you can run from a fire. Disease gives you nothing to fight, nothing to see, and nowhere to run. It just happens, to you, to your family, to your entire village at once sometimes. Ancient people weren't stupid, they were observant and logical. They noticed patterns, that disease spread between people, that certain places seemed cursed, that some people got sick while others didn't. They just had the wrong explanation for all of it. And the wrong explanation led to some genuinely terrifying responses. The ancient Egyptians blamed disease on Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of war, destruction, and pestilence. She was not subtle about it. When Sekhmet was angry, she sent plagues. Epidemics were literally her arrows, fired into the population from above. To stop a plague, you had to appease her. Massive temple rituals, elaborate offerings, priests performing ceremonies specifically designed to cool her down, which was terrifying in a very specific way. If the goddess of destruction decided to destroy you with disease, there was no medical treatment available. There was only prayer and whether she felt like listening. Egyptian medicine was actually quite advanced for its era. They had surgical knowledge, herbal treatments, and careful clinical observation. But when disease struck at scale, they went straight to the goddess. The Greeks took a more scientific approach, sort of. They developed the miasma theory. Disease came from bad air. Miasma was the poisonous vapor rising from rotting matter, swamps, decomposing bodies, garbage. If you breathed bad air, you got sick. Hence, malaria, from the Italian malaria, bad air. Hippocrates, the father of Western medicine, was a firm believer in miasma. He cataloged diseases carefully, observed symptoms methodically, and looked for patterns in the environment. He was completely wrong about the cause, but the observation that certain places and conditions consistently made people sick, entirely correct. Swamps really do cause malaria, not because of the air, because of the mosquitoes breeding in the water. Ancient people kept making the right observations and reaching the wrong conclusions. And then Athens received a lesson in just how terrifying disease could be at scale. 430 BC. Athens was the most advanced civilization in the Western world in the middle of a war with Sparta, and then a plague arrived. We still don't know exactly what it was, possibly typhoid fever, possibly something now extinct. What we know is what the historian Thucydides wrote, because he survived it. He described Sudden violent fever, redness and burning in the eyes, the throat and tongue turning bloody, violent sneezing, then chest pain, vomiting, retching, and skin covered in pustules and ulcers. It killed approximately 1/4 of the Athenian army and enormous portions of the civilian population, including Pericles, the most powerful man in Athens, the most advanced city in the Western world. 1/4 of its people dead. No one had any idea why. Roman medicine was a study in contradictions. On the scientific side, Galen advanced human anatomy significantly. Roman military medicine was sophisticated, with dedicated surgeons, field hospitals, and systematic wound care. The Roman army was probably the best treated fighting force in the ancient world. On the divine side, when serious disease struck, you went to the temple of Asclepius, the god of medicine. You'd sleep on the temple floor. Asclepius would visit you in a dream. The sacred snakes would crawl over you. You'd wake up either cured or with divine instructions for your treatment. This practice was called incubation. It was the primary treatment for serious illness across the ancient world. The Romans built history's most advanced infrastructure, including aqueducts and sewers that genuinely saved millions of lives. They also slept on temple floors, waiting for medically useful snake dreams. Both things at the same time. And then came the Black Death. 1347, a Genoese trading fleet arrives in Sicily from the Black Sea. Some sailors are dead already. The living have massive black swellings in their armpits and groins, oozing blood and pus. Their bodies are covered in dark blotches. The harbor masters of Messina order the fleet out of port immediately. Too late. The Black Death, bubonic plague, spread from Sicily across the entire European continent over the following 3 years. It killed between 30 and 60% of Europe's total population. Think about that number. If you'd been alive in 1347 Europe and survived to 1353, between a third and more than half of every person you had ever known was dead. Your family, your neighbors, your priest, your doctor, and nobody, not one person on the continent, had any explanation for why. Medieval Europeans responded to the Black Death in several ways. Almost all of them were wrong. The flagellants were a mass movement of people who walked from town to town, publicly whipping themselves. The logic was internally consistent. God is punishing us for our sins. We must demonstrate our suffering sufficiently to appease him. If we flagellate ourselves, physically, visibly, with enough conviction, he may lift the plague. Groups of hundreds of bloodied people, walking between cities, drawing crowds. It didn't stop the plague. It probably spread it. But when you believed disease was divine punishment and had no concept of infection, it was the most rational response available. The most iconic image of plague response was the plague doctor. Long black robe, wide-brimmed black hat, white bird beak mask projecting forward from the face. The beak was stuffed with herbs, dried flowers, and aromatic compounds: lavender, camphor, garlic, rose petals. The logic came directly from miasma theory. Bad air causes disease, therefore good-smelling air prevents it. Fill your mask with fragrant substances, breathe only that air, stay healthy. The plague doctor also carried a long wooden stick, not for fighting, but for examining patients and moving bodies without direct physical contact, which was, accidentally, the correct instinct. Minimizing direct contact really does reduce disease transmission. The beak doctor's costume was entirely wrong in theory, partially effective by accident in practice. Medieval medicine in one image. The most catastrophic disease event in human history was not the Black Death. It was smallpox arriving in the Americas. When Spanish conquistadors reached the New World in the early 1500s, they brought with them diseases the indigenous populations had never encountered and had zero immunity to: smallpox, measles, influenza. The Aztec Empire, with a population of approximately 5 million, was reduced by an estimated 90% within a century. Not primarily through conquest, through disease. The people dying had no framework for what was happening. Their gods offered no explanation. Their medicine had no treatment. Even the Spanish didn't understand what they were causing. They didn't know about germ theory either. The largest demographic collapse in recorded history, caused entirely by something nobody could see. Ancient medicine, attempting to fight disease without germ theory, developed a remarkable range of treatments. Some worked, most didn't. Some were considerably worse than the disease itself. Bloodletting, draining blood from sick patients, was based on the humoral theory. Disease caused an imbalance between blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Remove the excess blood, restore the balance. This was performed for nearly 2,000 years on patients who were already weakened by illness. Trepanning, drilling holes in the living skull, was practiced on every inhabited continent, sometimes to release spirits. Excavated skulls show healed bone margins, meaning patients survived the procedure. Frequently. Herbal medicine, surprisingly effective. Willow bark relieves fever because it contains salicylic acid, the active ingredient in aspirin. Ancient healers found this by observation, not chemistry. Ancient medicine was a mixture of accidental pharmacology and genuinely dangerous fiction. Across virtually every ancient culture, the most common explanation for disease was spirits. Mesopotamia, illness was caused by demons called the Asaku. A specialist healer called the Ashipu performed elaborate rituals to identify and expel them. Diagnosis required determining which demon was responsible. Ancient China, disease spirits had names, personalities, and preferred locations within the body. Treatment combined ritual, herbal medicine, and acupuncture. Traditional African medicine, illness as spiritual imbalance. The healer's primary task was identifying which ancestral spirit or force was involved and negotiating its departure. The particular terror of disease as demon was this: if a demon chose you, it chose you. There was no preventive measure, no way to make yourself less of a target. The demon was already inside. The loss of control was its own special horror. The Black Death had a predecessor that nearly destroyed the Byzantine Empire. 541 AD, the plague of Justinian, the same bubonic plague arriving 8 centuries earlier, hit Constantinople, the largest and most powerful city in the world. Emperor Justinian himself contracted it and survived, which is why it bears his name. The plague killed an estimated 25 to 50 million people over the following 2 centuries, possibly half the population of the Eastern Roman Empire. It contributed directly to the Byzantine Empire's failure to reconquer Western Europe. It weakened both Byzantine and Persian power simultaneously, creating the conditions for the rapid spread of Islam in the 7th century. Disease didn't just kill people, it redirected the entire course of history. Here's the remarkable thing: ancient and medieval people developed genuinely effective public health measures without understanding why they worked. Quarantine, from the Italian quarantina, meaning 40 days, was introduced in Venice in 1377. Ships arriving from plague-affected regions were required to anchor offshore for 40 days before anyone could disembark. The Venetians had no concept of bacterial incubation periods. They simply observed that isolation appeared to help. The word quarantine comes from this practice. The mechanism is scientifically correct. The theory behind it was entirely wrong. Jewish religious law required ritual hand-washing after contact with the dead. Islamic tradition required washing 5 times daily before prayer. Roman sewers removed human waste from dense urban populations. None of these practices were designed with germ theory in mind. All of them reduced disease transmission significantly. In the 1860s and 1870s, everything in human medicine changed. Louis Pasteur's experiments demonstrated that microorganisms cause fermentation, spoilage, and, by extension, disease. He called it germ theory. Robert Koch went further. He identified specific bacteria responsible for specific diseases: anthrax, tuberculosis, cholera. Each one had a name, a shape, a reproducible cause. For the first time in human history, the invisible enemy was visible. The implications cascaded outward within decades: vaccines, antibiotics, surgical sterilization, treated water supplies, scientifically designed sewage systems. Average life expectancy in the developed world went from roughly 40 years in 1800 to over 70 years by 1950. One conceptual breakthrough, 150 years. That much difference in how long a human life lasts. But here's the twist that ancient people deserve credit for. In China, as early as the 10th century AD, practitioners were taking material from smallpox pustules and blowing it into the nostrils of healthy people, deliberately inducing a mild form of the disease to create lasting immunity. This was variolation, a working vaccine 800 years before Edward Jenner. The Ottoman Empire adopted it widely by the 1700s. Lady Mary Wortley Montagu observed it in Constantinople in 1718 and brought the practice back to England. Ancient people had observed that survivors of smallpox never got it again. They developed a practical, life-saving solution without understanding the mechanism. Right result, wrong explanation, saved lives anyway. The Indus Valley Civilization, around 2500 BC, built the world's first urban sewage systems. Every house in Mohenjo-Daro had a toilet connected to covered brick drains. The Romans delivered clean water to millions through their aqueduct networks. Roman public latrines were flushed, common, and apparently social. Medieval European cities that maintained functional Roman sanitation infrastructure had measurably lower plague mortality than those that didn't. Ancient engineers solved major public health problems thousands of years before germ theory existed. They didn't know what bacteria was, they just knew, put the waste somewhere else. And for the record, the ancient terror of disease never fully went away. In 2020, a novel coronavirus spread across the globe. Billions of people went into lockdown. Economies collapsed. 3 years of collective disruption. We had germ theory, we had vaccine technology, we had real-time genetic sequencing of the pathogen available within weeks. And within days of the outbreak, masks, hand sanitizer, avoiding the sick, quarantine. The same responses ancient people used, scaled up by 2,000 years of science. The fear was the same, the uncertainty was the same. The invisible enemy was still invisible until you looked at it through the right lens. So the next time someone calls ancient people irrational for believing disease was caused by angry gods or invisible demons, remind them that we had germ theory, antibiotics, and the CDC. And we still panic bought every bottle of hand sanitizer on the planet. Ancient humans were terrified of disease because disease was genuinely, demonstrably, catastrophically terrifying. They just had to face it without any of the tools that make it survivable. That's not superstition, that's courage under impossible conditions. So there you have it. Disease was invisible, unstoppable, and responsible for more human death than every war in recorded history combined. Ancient people faced it with prayer, ritual, and occasionally very good observational luck. The remarkable thing isn't the terror. It's that they built civilizations anyway. Hit subscribe for new animated history every week. Drop your topic in the comments. See you next time.